All right, let's set the scene. It's 1919. The Great War has just ended. The Ottoman Empire, a global power for 600 years, is on its knees, defeated, with its lands being carved up by the victors. Now, in a moment of total despair, could a single piece of paper really change a nation's fate? Well, today we're looking at the Amasya Circular. And you'll see it's not just some old document, it's the birth certificate of a nation's will to live, written with the stone-cold clarity of survival. Before we get into any of the history, just let those words sink in for a second. This one sentence, this is the engine of an entire revolution. It represents a massive seismic shift in power, taking it away from a centuries-old throne and putting it right into the hands of the people. But how on earth did Anatolia get to a point where such a radical idea could not only be written, but become a nation's rallying cry? You see, to really understand Amasya, our story has to begin in the small town of Havza. In the spring of 1919, Anatolia was in a terrible state. Allied warships were sitting in the capital, foreign troops were marching on its soil, and a lot of people were just holding on to this quiet, desperate hope that the occupation was only temporary. But when Mustafa Kemal arrived, he saw this dangerous complacency for what it was, a national death sleep. And he absolutely knew the nation had to be awakened, and it had to happen fast. And boy, did he move fast. Just 3 days after getting to Havza, he issued a directive that sent shockwaves across the entire country. Now, this first circular wasn't a call to arms. Not yet, anyway. It was a call to consciousness. And within days, the effect was absolutely electric, as the first coordinated nationwide response to the occupation started to take shape. This right here, this shows the psychological masterstroke of the Havza Circular. The mass protest rallies it called for were designed to do one critical thing: to shatter the illusion that all of this was just some temporary problem. By bringing people out into the streets, it made the threat real, it made it tangible, and most importantly, it made it a collective experience. This was the first step in forging all those scattered local worries into one unified national will. The directives themselves were just brilliantly strategic. First, make a lot of noise. Hold huge, passionate rallies to show the world that people were angry. Second, make it official. Flood the Allied powers and even the Sultan's own government with protest telegrams to prove this was an organized movement, not just a random mob. And this last point, this is pure political genius. A very clear warning not to harm any Christian minorities. Kemal knew the Allies were just looking for any excuse to justify a deeper occupation, and with this one move, he skillfully denied them that pretext. And hey, just a quick pause here. If you're finding this deep dive valuable, please don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this explainer. All the information we're presenting here is compiled from open sources. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the story. So, with the nation's consciousness finally sparked in Havza, the movement now needed a real manifesto, an ideological foundation it could build on. And that moment came on the night of June 22, 1919, in Amasya. Inside the dimly lit Saraduzu Kazerne, Mustafa Kemal and his fellow commanders drafted the document that would become the official declaration of the Turkish Revolution. So, what exactly was the Amasya Circular? Well, it was so much more than a simple military message. Historians rightly call it the birth certificate of modern Turkey. Why? Because for the very first time, it clearly laid out the justification, the method, and the goal of the national struggle. It was, simply put, the complete ideological package for a revolution. The first article laid the legal and moral groundwork. It established the high ground, right from the start. This wasn't some rebellion for personal power. This was a legitimate struggle based on a universal principle: the defense of your homeland. By declaring the nation's very existence was on the line, it made the fight a necessity, not just a choice. And right here, this is the revolutionary heart of the entire document. This is the sentence that changes everything. For 600 years, people expected salvation to come from the Sultan, from the government, or maybe from a foreign power. This article says that era is over. The power, the agency, the responsibility, it all rests solely with the people themselves. This is the first official whisper of a republic. And finally, the goal. The circular basically said that the government in Istanbul was under the thumb of the occupiers and was failing in its duty. Therefore, a new body, a national council, had to be formed to represent the true will of the people. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a direct call to create an alternative government that would speak for the nation when its own capital no longer could. What you're looking at here is the explicit transfer of sovereignty. It's a fundamental power shift. No longer does authority flow down from the Sultan's throne in Istanbul. Now it flows up from the collective will and determination of the nation itself. This wasn't just a proposal for reform, it was a declaration of a whole new political reality. Of course, a bold declaration like this was never going to be ignored. So how did everyone react? Well, the responses from both the Sultan's government and the occupying Allied powers were immediate. They were severe, and they proved just how truly revolutionary the Amasya Circular really was. For the Sultan's government in Istanbul, the reaction was just pure fear. They understood immediately that this wasn't just some disgruntled general out in the provinces. No, this was a direct existential challenge to their authority and to their very right to rule. The circular had drawn an undeniable line in the sand, and they acted on that fear right away. The Minister of the Interior, a man named Ali Kemal Pasha, officially branded Mustafa Kemal a rebel. An order was sent out dismissing him from his post, and he was commanded to return to the capital at once, a summons he would, of course, famously defy, setting the stage for the next phase of this incredible conflict. Meanwhile, the British, who were the main occupying power, were also watching all this with growing alarm. Any hope they had that Kemal was just in Anatolia to restore order quickly vanished. They saw his organizing for exactly what it was, the beginning of a full-blown insurrection against Allied control. And this quote from the British High Commissioner, Admiral Kelthorpe, it just says it all. The Allies were not fooled for a second. They knew that Kemal's true purpose wasn't to pacify Anatolia for the Sultan. It was to organize it into a disciplined fighting force for a new national struggle. The game had completely changed. So here's the crucial takeaway. The Amasya Circular wasn't just some fleeting moment of defiance. It was the essential ideological blueprint for everything that came next. The core principles laid out in that room in Amasya: national integrity, popular sovereignty, and representative government. They formed an unbreakable chain that led directly to the national congresses, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, and, ultimately, to the Republic of Turkey. You know, when you lay it all out like this, you see this beautiful, logical progression. Havza was the spark that woke the nation up. Amasya provided the revolutionary ideology, declaring that sovereignty now belonged to the people. The congresses that followed built the organizational structure. And the final step? The formation of the republic, the state built on that very foundation. Each step was simply impossible without the one that came before it. And this leaves us with one last, powerful thought to consider. How does the document, drafted in secret, signed by just a handful of officers, end up becoming the catalyst for a revolution and the birth certificate of a modern nation? Well, it happens when an idea, perfectly articulated for its moment, captures the unexpressed will of millions and gives them a reason, a method, and a goal to fight for.